Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And so acquisition season continues on. I know there's been a lot of focus on Microsoft's acquisition spree, like Activision, Blizzard, and Bethesda, and I mean, rightfully so, but Sony's actually been quietly pretty active in the background as well, and that continues on today as they just announced yet another studio acquisition, making it their 10th new game studio since 2019. 11, actually, if you want to include mobile as well. So, yeah, they've been more than just a little active, and we're going to talk all about that in a bit, and their newest part of the team. Then also, a new game's been circulating the web, and fans are going absolutely crazy over its gameplay footage, wondering if it's even real because it looks so technically good. It is quite impressive. I'll just kind of say that much. So do make sure to stay tuned for all of that as well. As always, though, do hit those buttons below, like, subscribe, and do ring that bell. The myth is you'll get more content just like this, and it does help the channel a ton, so I'd greatly appreciate it. With that said, though, let's just go and jump right into our first topic of the day, starting off with Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack. They did just announce 4 new Sega games, which, is still kind of crazy to say out loud. Back in the 90s, we grew up knowing Sega and Nintendo as fierce competitors. You had to be there, but here we are now, and they're a part of that same classic subscription. Nonetheless, though, this new lineup of games includes Flicky, Kid Chameleon, Pulseman, and then Street Fighter II Special Champion Edition. Yeah, I actually think this is just one of the better Switch Online lineups that they've announced thus far. All 4 of these games are interesting in their own way. Kid Chameleon, this is a well-regarded game by fans. A lot of people do consider it to be one of the better Sega Genesis platformers out there. It does have its own unique twist where you can change the various forms with their own abilities. So this is a very welcome addition. Then Pulseman. This is a rather interesting title as well. Not a lot of people seem to know about this game specifically, but it was actually developed by Game Freak, interestingly enough, before Pokemon ever existed. Now, the reason a lot of people don't know much about this game is because it never got a physical release in the West when it originally released. Instead, it was actually part of the Sega Channel online service, which didn't exactly catch the world on fire. So this is a really cool game to see come over to Switch Online as more people can now discover it. Then, of course, you have Street Fighter II. Not much really needs to be said about this game. It's a legendary fighting game for a reason. And then even with Flicky, this was originally an arcade game where you save your little bird pals from house cats. It was later on ported over to the Sega Genesis, but here we are, and you can now play it on Switch Online. Oh, and that's the thing. All these games are available right now if you're subscribed to Nintendo Switch Online. Next up, though, since we're on the topic of Nintendo, and since we just talked about Game Freak, actually, well, they just posted some new patch notes for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. They are live today, though obviously by this point, every patch is anticipated considering the state of this game, which, I hate saying that. I think a lot of you all know and understand that I'm a big Pokemon fan. It is one of my favorite franchises ever, which, makes this release even more frustrating. On one side, I do think that it's a great Pokemon game. Its transition to a fully open world, I think, is incredibly fun. But, unfortunately, at the same time, the performance just isn't where it should be. Sure, I can play it and I can enjoy it so long as I can overlook its shoddy performance, but that's the problem. Nobody, and absolutely nobody, should have to overlook something as obvious as this. Again, because this is a good game, and also because, just the pedigree of a franchise like Pokemon, it's just a really unfortunate situation. Now, shortly after release, though, Nintendo did come out and say that they were committed to fix these issues. So yeah, every single patch is now highly anticipated in the hopes that we will get a performance fix. And well, they just dropped its 1.3.0 patch notes, and in short, there's no mention of a performance fix. Now, they did, however, mention several bug fixes, which, that's good to see. I will leave a link below if you want to look into all of the different details. But unfortunately, if you've been waiting for a performance fix specifically, you might as well go ahead and reset the clock. Truthfully, I think by this point, the fix might just be the Switch successor. If not that, then I'm thinking maybe alongside its big expansions, maybe they're trying to align its performance fixes with that. But here we are 6 months from its launch, and they've been very tight-lipped as to what their plans are going forward. So I guess we'll see. Now, let's go and talk about PlayStation, though, as they just announced yet another studio acquisition, this time for Firewalk Studios. Now, if you don't know who they are, this is actually a studio that was formed back in 2018 by a number of former Bungie veterans, some actually from Activision as well. And then they announced a AAA live service game in 2021 in partnership with Sony. This is also a pretty sizable studio with 150 employees. So even though fans don't really know much about Firewalk Studios, this is not a big name or anything like that, Sony has been working with them for a couple years now, and apparently they were so impressed by their work, well, they decided to make them a permanent part of PlayStation Studios. And this does seem to fit a recent trend with PlayStation. They did a very similar thing with Haven Studios just last year. That was another studio formed by veteran talent, and shortly after announcing a partnership to publish their first game, which is also a live service title, Sony decided to acquire them as well. I actually find this to be a very interesting strategy. Basically, it seems what Sony's trying to do here is, instead of building a new studio from scratch, they're instead scouting brand new studios with proven veteran talent that can fit their need, being live service games. They're investing into these type of studios early on, and if they like what they see, they offer them a chance to be a permanent part of the team with all of PlayStation's resources going forward. If anything else, these seem to be low-risk, high-reward acquisitions, and that's what I really want to talk about here. You know, obviously, acquisition season has been ongoing for a number of years now, and even though Microsoft has been in the forefront with major buyouts like Bethesda and Activision Blizzard, Sony, I mean, they've been no slouch either. They haven't really acquired those big established names, but they have, however, acquired 11 new studios since 2019. So they've quietly been very, very busy. This includes Insomniac Games, which was, I'd say that's probably their best purchase yet. They've had great output since that acquisition. Then they acquired Bungie, being a multi-billion-dollar deal. They got Haven Studios, as I just mentioned. Then you have Savage Game Studios, technically. That is a mobile studio, so do keep that in mind. They got Bluepoint Games. That's a pretty big one. Fabric Games, Firesprite, Housemarque, Nixes, Valkyrie Entertainment, and then today, of course, Firewalk Studios. So while Sony hasn't necessarily grabbed those major studios that fans will immediately recognize, at the same time, without a doubt, they're gearing up as well. It is a different strategy than what we're seeing from Microsoft. They are focusing on smaller, less-known studios, mostly in which they've closely worked with in the past, but they are making a major push to expand PlayStation, and that's the important takeaway here. I mean, 11 of their 24 studios have been acquired in just the last 4 years. Something else that this does make very clear, though, is Sony's commitment to live service games. I mean, if that wasn't already clear, it definitely is now. Both Haven Studios and Firewalk are working on live service games. Then 3 other studios they've picked up recently are support studios which can help out with these games. And then even Bungie. Sony noted that one of the reasons they wanted them is for their live service expertise. So even though they're not making exclusive PlayStation games, they are still a multi-platform studio. Bungie, however, will still be able to help some of these other studios establish themselves in a highly, highly competitive market. Here's the thing, though. A lot of times fans hear live service games and they're immediately skeptical, and I completely understand that. I mean, you all have even heard me criticize Ubisoft for their hyper-focus on these style of games in the past. They are very hit or miss. I do call them mythical cash cows for a reason, but what I do like about Sony's strategy is that they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. Instead of shoehorning their beloved studios like Guerrilla Games and Sucker Punch into making these live service games, what they're doing instead is they're expanding. So what I'm trying to say here is that it appears Sony is attempting to make both styles of games. Those single-player AAA experiences that PlayStation fans know and love so much, they're still coming. So more or less, these live service games, they seem to be an addition, not a subtraction. So yeah, I think that they're going about this in a smart way, but let me know what you all think about all this in the comments below. Do you like this strategy or not? Next up here, though, let's go and talk about a new game, Unrecord, that fans are just in disbelief about right now. This game has already eclipsed 1.6 million views on IGN in less than 24 hours, which, I mean, that's crazy for a new IP. But when you see its gameplay, you immediately understand why this is popping off the way it is. This is one of the most realistic games that I think we've ever seen. But that's kind of the thing here, because some fans are even questioning on whether or not this is real gameplay at all. Now, one of the programmers has since tried to shut down that speculation by making a post on Twitter, but I mean, you can see it's a hyper-realistic first-person shooter taking that realism to the next level with an innovative twist where you play as a police officer and see everything through the perspective of a body cam. The movement, the scenery, the animations, it's all just so realistic. It is powered by Unreal Engine 5, which again, I think speaks volumes to what we have in store for the future. I've said this before, but this generation is only now getting started. But as for this game in specific, they do compare it to a crime detective novel and thriller where you investigate several criminal cases. It does sound like that there's an emphasis on its story as well, so do keep that in mind. My only thing about this idea, though, and this might sound strange, but at times it might look too real. Now, what I mean by that is that I think that it could be unsettling for some people. So I could see it being a little bit more polarizing in that regard. Now, I think that'll kind of depend on the person, but even then, I think this idea is a highly interesting concept. It goes to show a new camera angle really adds something unique to the gameplay and also to the realism. And just from a technical level, it is highly, highly impressive. I have to say, though, this idea of a body cam, it could also work as a horror game. I mean, can you imagine that realism in a horror game? Now, that could be a wild, frightening experience. However, I do want to know your all's opinions about this game. Are you interested? Do you think it's maybe too realistic? And yeah, just give me your opinions about Unrecord in the comments below. If you are interested, though, Unrecord supposedly is still in pre-production, but you can wishlist it on Steam right now. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day. That we're asked you all if Nintendo could revive just one dormant IP for the Switch or its successor, which would you most want it to be? I mean, Nintendo has a lot of beloved IP here, but the majority of you all being 42% voted for Star Fox, then 18% of you all voted for F-Zero, 14% of you all voted for Earthbound/Mother, 13% of you all voted for Other, whether that be Golden Sun, Wario Land, Punch-Out, etc., and then 12% of you all voted for Kid Icarus. I'm actually a little disappointed that Kid Icarus didn't get more votes. I absolutely adore Kid Icarus. It is one of my favorite games on the 3DS, and I think that it has so much potential to come over to home consoles. I think that with a more standardized control method and just better visuals, I think that Kid Icarus could be just such an excellent franchise to play around with. Either way, though, I mean, Star Fox, I can't fault you all for voting for Star Fox. Star Fox needs to come back. And the thing about Star Fox is there's a number of ways that you can make a new Star Fox game. They could strictly focus on the aerial combat like they did in Star Fox 64, or if they wanted to, they could take it down to the ground level. I mean, we've seen that in games like Star Fox Adventure. And I think that's kind of what I'd like to see from a new Star Fox game. I would like to see them really expand on his IP, maybe have a little bit of both. You can fly around in the sky, but then also have, that stuff on the ground level as well. I think by combining the two, you can make for a really interesting title. But I know one thing for certain: this is a franchise that absolutely needs to return. You all are absolutely correct about that. Hopefully that will happen sooner rather than later. But truthfully, and I've said this pretty much all week, whether that be with Xbox, PlayStation, or in this case Nintendo, truthfully, I'd be happy to see all of these games return. So I don't think there's really a wrong choice. I mean, look at something like Earthbound as an example. I don't even think it necessarily needs some huge visual overhaul or anything like that. Nintendo could make a smaller budget game with old school visuals, because it still holds up incredibly well to this day, and I think that they could have success with that. I mean, look at something like Undertale and even Omori. Those games have had a lot of success. They have that retro art style to it, and I think Nintendo could easily do that with Earthbound and have a lot of people excited. But, either way, let's at least get a new Star Fox. Come on, Nintendo. Listen up. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode. But if you liked the video, don't forget to hit the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.